stood in the shadows of the Seattle courtroom, my heart pounding like a war drum as the judge's voice sliced through the murmurs. Wait, is that Senator Emily Reed? Every head swiveled. Cameras flashed like lightning. My sister Olivia, poised at the defendant's table in her crisp navy suit, froze, her eyes locking onto mine. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. 12 years had passed since she'd called me a disgrace, since my father locked me out of our family's waterfront mansion, since my mother left my life in a trash bag on the driveway. 12 years since I'd vanished, shed my name, my hair, my past. Now, here I was, not Emma Carter, the failure they'd buried, but Emily Reed, U.S. Senator, standing tall in a room where my silence spoke louder than their lies. The air crackled with shock, and in that suspended moment, I felt the weight of every scar I'd earned, every night I'd survived, every dream I'd clawed back from the ashes. This wasn't just a courtroom. This was my reckoning. Let me take you back to where it all began, to a Sunday in 2013, when the world still knew me as Emma Carter. The Seattle sky was a bruise of gray, rain tapping the floor-to-ceiling windows of our family's estate on Lake Washington. The dining room smelled of rosemary and regret, the mahogany table polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the cold glint of the chandelier above. My father, Richard Carter, retired naval officer and patriarch of our gilded cage, sat at the head, his silver hair slicked back, his jaw set like a battleship. My mother, Margaret, perched to his right, her pearls glowing against her cream blouse, her smile as fragile as spun glass. Across from me was Olivia, my older sister, her auburn hair pulled into a sleek bun, her eyes sharp as the steak knife she held. At 26, she was already a rising star, newly promoted to federal prosecutor, the pride of the Carter name. And me? I was 21, the afterthought, the art history major with paint-stained fingers and a backpack full of poetry books, sitting at the table's far end like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Richard raised his glass, the red wine catching the light. "To Olivia," he said, his voice booming with pride. "A true Carter, making her mark on the world." Glasses clinked. Olivia's lips curved into a practiced smile. No one looked at me. No one mentioned my graduation 2 weeks earlier, the diploma I'd earned with no family in the audience. I'd walked the stage alone, clutching my degree like a lifeline, knowing they wouldn't have come even if I'd begged. To them, I was the odd one, the dreamer who scribbled Rilke quotes in sketchbooks, who painted at dawn in Volunteer Park, who dared to question the polished perfection of our family's legacy. I was the crack in their facade, the stain they couldn't bleach out. I pushed my fork through the roasted potatoes, my stomach twisting. The silence at my end of the table was louder than their laughter. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket, a sharp vibration that made me flinch. I ignored it. Another buzz, then another. My mother's eyes flicked toward me, a warning. "Emma," she said softly, "we're eating." I nodded, slipping the phone under the table. The screen glowed with notifications, texts, emails, voicemails, piling up like storm clouds. My friend Jess, check Twitter now. Another from my roommate, "Emma, what the hell is this?" A voicemail from an unknown number, the preview chilling. "You're trending, and it's bad." My pulse raced. I opened Twitter, my fingers trembling. There it was. A video, grainy but unmistakable. Me, at a college protest last spring, standing on a makeshift stage in Red Square, chanting against corporate greed, my face flushed with passion. His caption read, "Seattle heiress Emma Carter, unhinged radical, shames family name." The views were climbing. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. Comments poured in, vicious and sharp. Spoiled brat, terrorist wannabe. Bet her daddy's proud now. My breath caught. This wasn't just a video. It was a weapon. I looked up, my family still chatting, oblivious. But I knew who'd done this. Liam, my ex-boyfriend. The tech bro I'd dumped 6 months ago after catching him screenshotting my private texts. He'd been bitter, vengeful, promising I'd regret it. I hadn't known he'd filmed me at that protest, hadn't known he'd been waiting to strike. My phone buzzed again, a direct message from an anonymous account. "You're done, Carter. Enjoy the fall." The room spun. I shoved my chair back, the screech of wood on marble cutting through their conversation. "Emma, what's wrong?" Olivia's voice was cool, her eyes narrowing. I couldn't speak, my throat tight. I held up my phone, the video still playing. Richard's face darkened. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded, snatching the device. He watched for 10 seconds before his jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening. "You did this?" he roared, slamming the phone onto the table. "You think you can drag our name through the mud with your hippie stunts?" "It's not what it looks like," I stammered. "Liam, he leaked this. I was just—" "Enough!" Richard's voice was a thunderclap. He stood towering over me. "You've always been reckless, Emma, always chasing some pointless cause, embarrassing us. But this—" He gestured at the phone, the video now looping silently. "This is unforgivable." I turned to Olivia, desperate. "You know me, Liv. You know I'm not—" Her gaze was ice, her lips a thin line. "You should have thought about the family before you made a spectacle of yourself," she said, her voice low, venomous. Margaret clutched her napkin, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. No one defended me. No one asked if I was okay. That night, the storm broke. Olivia had already sent the video to Richard with a single line. "Handle this before it spreads." Not to protect me, but to shield the Carter legacy. By midnight, the video was everywhere. CNN, Fox, local blogs, even tabloids. My name was a hashtag, a punchline, a warning. Richard stormed into my room, his face a mask of fury. "You think we raised you to be a laughingstock?" he shouted, grabbing my art portfolio from my desk and tearing it in half, sketches fluttering to the floor like wounded birds. "You're no daughter of mine." "I didn't post it," I cried, my voice breaking. "I was targeted, violated." "You violated us," he snapped, tossing the remains of my portfolio onto my bed. "You want to live like a radical? Do it without my name, my house, or my money." He left, the door slamming behind him. Margaret stood in the hallway, her rosary beads clicking, her eyes averted. Olivia lingered at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, not a flicker of remorse. I packed in silence, stuffing clothes, sketchbooks, and my worn copy of Audre Lorde into a duffel bag. The rain lashed the windows, mirroring the chaos in my chest. When I stepped into the living room, Richard was waiting. He slid my bank card across the coffee table. "Don't call," he said. "Don't come back." I walked out into the storm, the gate clanging shut behind me. Margaret watched from the window, a ghost behind the glass. But she didn't wave. The rain soaked through my jacket, my boots squelching in the mud. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. The city I'd grown up in felt like a stranger, its glittering skyline mocking my fall. The first night I slept in Jess's car, parked in a Walmart lot, the rain drumming on the roof. By morning, my phone was dead, but the world wasn't done with me. Liam had escalated, hacking my social media, posting doctored clips that made me look like a violent extremist. One showed me throwing a bottle at police, fabricated but convincing. The comments were a cesspool. "Lock her up. She's a danger to society." I turned off the phone, my hands shaking. Jess let me crash on her couch, but her roommate was uneasy, whispering about trouble following me. By day 3, I was out, wandering Seattle's rainy streets, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder. That's when they found me. Liam's followers, a pack of tech bros, emboldened by his posts, spotted me near Pike Place Market. "There she is," one shouted, his voice slurred with beer. They closed in, their phones raised, filming me like I was prey. "Radical Emma, huh? Where's your protest now?" A bottle sailed past my head, shattering on the pavement. I ran, my heart hammering, ducking into an alley behind a fish stall. Their laughter echoed, boots pounding closer. I pressed against a dumpster, holding my breath, praying they'd pass. A siren wailed in the distance and they scattered, leaving me trembling in the dark. I knew then, Seattle wasn't safe. Liam's vendetta, my family's rejection. It was a death sentence if I stayed. I hitchhiked to Portland the next day, my thumb out on I-5, rain blurring my vision. A trucker named Carl, with a kind face and a thermos of coffee, dropped me at a shelter downtown. "You look like you're running from something," he said. I didn't answer. The shelter was a blur of cots and coughs, the air thick with desperation. I got a job as a barista at a gritty coffee shop, burning my hands on the espresso machine, memorizing orders for hipsters who never looked me in the eye. At night, I worked as a janitor at a community college, mopping floors under flickering lights, the silence my only companion. To pay rent for a crumbling studio in Southeast Portland, I picked up freelance coding gigs, teaching myself Python from library computers. The apartment was barely a room, peeling paint, a mattress on the floor, a cracked mirror that showed a stranger's face, but it was mine. I painted when I could, stealing moments after midnight. One night, too exhausted to sleep, I dragged a tarp across my floor and used cheap acrylics to create a mural. It was a cityscape, fractured and jagged, buildings bleeding into shadows. I called it Collapse. It stayed hidden behind the tarp, my secret rebellion against a world that wanted me erased. I stopped being Emma Carter that winter. I registered as Emily Red at a job board, a name plain enough to blend in, sharp enough to cut through my past. I shaved my head in the bathroom, the clippers buzzing like a vow. Strands fell into the sink, dark and final. It wasn't a breakdown, it was a birth. But Richard wasn't done with me. One night, while working late at a tech startup where I'd landed a data entry gig, I noticed a man lingering outside, his silhouette framed by the streetlight. He followed me to the bus stop, his footsteps deliberate, his face hidden under a hood. My heart raced. I ducked into a 24-hour diner, pretending to order coffee, watching him through the window. He made a call, then vanished. The next day, my boss pulled me aside. "Someone's been asking about you," she said, her voice uneasy. "Said they're a PI, looking for an Emma Carter. You know anything about that?" I lied, shaking my head, but I knew. Richard was hunting me, not to bring me home, but to bury me deeper. I couldn't afford to slip. At the startup, I overheard a heated argument in the break room. Executives discussing a housing project that sounded too good to be true. Low-income families would get affordable homes, they said, but the numbers didn't add up. I dug into the files after hours, my hands sweating as I copied documents. It was a scam, funneling public funds into private accounts while displacing hundreds. I leaked the files to a journalist at the Oregonian, signing my email anonymous. The story broke a week later, the project scrapped, families saved. But the executives suspected a mole. I was fired the next day, no explanation, just a security guard escorting me out. I didn't care. I'd done something right, something real. That's how Sarah Nguyen found me. She ran Bridges for Justice, a nonprofit fighting for housing equity, and she'd read the exposé. "You're the one who blew the whistle, aren't you?" she asked over coffee, her eyes sharp but kind. I didn't deny it. She offered me a job. Fetching coffee, filing papers, running errands. It was grunt work, but I watched. I learned. I drafted grant proposals, organized rallies, studied urban policy at night on a second-hand laptop. I snuck into city hall meetings, sitting in the back, memorizing the language of power. I stopped dreaming of home. Instead, I built a new one, brick by brick in the spaces where I could make a difference. Portland's winters were brutal, the cold seeping into my bones, but I kept moving. One night, at a rally against gentrification, the crowd turned chaotic. Police in riot gear pushed forward, tear gas clouding the air. I coughed, my eyes burning, as a cop grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "You're under arrest," he growled, but a protester shoved him, and I slipped free, running until my lungs screamed. My face flashed on the evening news, blurry but recognizable. I stayed inside for days, heart pounding every time a car slowed outside my window. Richard's PI, Liam's followers, the police. Too many eyes were searching for me. But I wasn't invisible anymore. Sarah promoted me at Bridges, trusting me with bigger projects. I joined Portland's Housing Policy Council, a low-profile role with real impact. At one meeting, a developer pitched a luxury high-rise that would displace 300 families. I waited until he finished, then stood, my voice steady. "This isn't progress," I said. "It's theft dressed in glass and steel." The room went silent, then erupted in applause. The developer's face twisted, but the council voted against him. I'd made enemies, but I'd also made a name. Emily Reed, the advocate who didn't back down. A reporter from Willamette Week approached me afterward, notebook in hand. "You're a rising star," he said. "Let's do a profile." Face of the new Portland. My stomach churned. "No photos," I said, "and call me E. Reed." He raised an eyebrow but agreed. I couldn't risk Richard finding me, not when I was finally building something. Every night, I lit a candle in my studio, staring at a defaced family photo I'd kept, my face scratched out with a key. I whispered the same words. Be known for what you do, not what they called you. Some nights I wondered if Margaret still had my baby pictures, if Olivia ever regretted her words, if Richard ever said my name. I didn't Google them. The distance was my shield, my salvation. Then came the headline that changed everything. Federal prosecutor Olivia Carter indicted for corruption. She'd falsified evidence in a fraud case tied to real estate tycoons, the same kind of deal I'd exposed in Portland. The news hit me like a wave, pulling me under. My advisors urged me to stay neutral. "You're a senator now," they said. "Don't touch this mess." But I couldn't stay away. Not because I wanted to save Olivia. God, no. But because the ghosts of my past were screaming in that courtroom. I booked a flight to Seattle. No press, no entourage, just me and the weight of 12 years. I slipped into the courthouse through a side door, my senator pin tucked under a scarf, my face half hidden by sunglasses. The room was sterile, the air heavy with whispers. Olivia sat at the front, impeccable, her posture rigid, her hands betraying her nerves. Margaret and Richard were in the gallery, older, smaller, but still carrying that Carter arrogance. I took a seat in the last row, blending into the shadows. Then Judge Clara Evans entered, her presence commanding, her eyes scanning the room. They landed on me. A pause, a flicker of recognition. "Wait, is that Senator Emily Reed?" she said, her voice carrying like a gavel. The room exploded. Reporters gasped, cameras swiveled, flashes blinding. Olivia's head whipped around, her eyes wide with disbelief. Margaret's hand flew to her chest, her face paling. Richard leaned forward, squinting as if he couldn't trust his eyes. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there, my spine straight, my presence a statement louder than words. The judge regained control, but the air never settled. Every few minutes, someone glanced back, their whispers buzzing like flies. I'd come to witness, not to speak, not to save, but my being there, alive, unbroken, was enough. I left as quietly as I'd come, stepping into Seattle's drizzle, my heart steady. By nightfall, my phone was a war zone. Missed calls, texts, voicemails from outlets I hadn't heard from in years. My face was on every channel, my name trending, not as a scandal, but as a mystery. Senator Emily Reed, the Carter outcast, returns. I sat in my hotel room, the city lights blurring through the window. My reflection in the glass was no longer a shadow, but a woman carved from steel and survival. I wasn't Emma Carter anymore. I was Emily Reed, and I'd come back not as a daughter, but as a force they couldn't ignore. The next morning, the old video resurfaced, pixelated but brutal, shared by anonymous accounts with captions calling me a traitor, a fraud. Liam's fingerprints were all over it, his vendetta alive and vicious. My staff panicked, urging lawsuits, statements, damage control. I said no, let it burn, I told them. I've survived worse. Then Richard called, his voice a blade through the phone. You're using our name to play victim, he said. You're nothing without us. I laughed, soft and cold. I was nothing with you, I said. Now, I'm everything you'll never be. I hung up, my hands steady. Margaret was hospitalized that night, a panic attack, my cousin texted me. Against every instinct, I flew back, slipping into her hospital room at dawn. She looked frail, her hands trembling under the blanket. Emma, she whispered, tears in her eyes. I didn't correct her. I sat beside her, silent, holding her hand, not for forgiveness, but for closure. I left a painting on her bedside table, a lone figure in a storm, titled Survivor. No note, no goodbye. I walked out, the hospital's hum fading behind me. Back in Portland, the media frenzy grew, cameras staking out my office, editorials dissecting my past. I gave no interviews, no tweets, just kept working. At a Senate meeting, I stood at the podium, my voice clear. I won't rewrite my past, I said, but I'll write my future. The room was silent, my staff tense, but I'd spoken. The next day, I introduced the Truth Shield Act, a bill to protect public figures from familial blackmail, a dagger aimed at the heart of my family's tactics. The headlines shifted. Senator Reed redefines resilience. Richard went quiet. Margaret stopped calling. Olivia's trial loomed, and I knew this was only the beginning. I walked Portland's streets that evening, a navy coat over my shoulders, coffee warming my hands. The city's golden light spilled across the Willamette, and for the first time, I felt free, not from my past, but from its power over me. I'd been called a failure, a disgrace, a ghost. Now I was a senator, a survivor, a voice. And no one, not Liam, not Richard, not Olivia, could silence me again. The fight was far from over, but I was ready. I'd built myself from ash, and I'd burn the world down before I let them bury me again. Portland rain was relentless, hammering the roof of my campaign office as I stared at the defaced family photo on my desk. my face scratched out with a key, a silent vow to never be Emma Carter again. The clock read 2:17 a.m., but sleep was a stranger. My Senate run was gaining traction, my platform of housing justice and transparency striking a chord, but the shadows of my past were closing in. The news of Olivia's indictment for falsifying evidence in a real estate fraud case had cracked open a vault of memories, and my appearance in her Seattle courtroom 3 weeks ago had lit a fuse. The world knew me now, not as the disgraced Carter daughter, but as Senator Emily Reed, a name I'd forged in blood. Yet the weight of that moment, the judge's voice echoing, "You're the senator," and Olivia's stunned gaze, wasn't triumph. It was a warning. The Carters didn't lose gracefully, and I'd just painted a target on my back. My phone buzzed, slicing through the quiet, a text from an unknown number. "You can't outrun us, Emma." Attached was a grainy photo of me leaving the courthouse, my scarf slipping, my senator pin glinting. My pulse quickened. I'd changed my name, my look, my life, but they'd found me. Richard, my father, with his naval officer's precision, or Liam, my vengeful ex, with his tech empire's reach. Someone was watching. I locked the door, the click echoing in the empty office, and checked the security feed. Nothing but rain and shadows. For now. The campaign office was a converted storefront in southeast Portland, its walls plastered with posters. Emily Reed for Oregon Senate. Let the work speak. My desk was a chaos of policy drafts, voter data, and a half-empty coffee mug, the only witness to my sleepless nights. I'd built this campaign on truth, on fighting for the families priced out of their homes, the communities erased by greed. But truth was a blade, and I'd cut too deep. The vandalism last week, smashed windows, spray-painted threats like traitor and Carter's trash, had forced me to hire private security. The notes left behind, scrawled in jagged ink, reeked of Liam's tech cronies, their loyalty bought with his startup's millions. "Back off, or you're next," one read. I hadn't backed off. I'd doubled down, rallying voters at a town hall the next day, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. But tonight, alone, the weight of their eyes, Liam's, Richard's, Olivia's, felt like a noose. I sank into my chair, rubbing my temples, when the power flickered. The hum of the heater died, plunging the room into silence. Rain lashed the windows, louder now, a rhythm like footsteps. I grabbed my phone, its glow casting jagged shadows, and texted my security guard, Marcus. "You outside?" No reply. My breath hitched. I crept to the window, peering through the blinds. The street was empty, streetlights blurred by the downpour. Then a flash of movement. A figure in a hooded jacket, standing under a tree across the road, phone raised, filming. My heart slammed against my ribs. I ducked, fumbling for the pepper spray in my drawer. The figure didn't move, just stood there, a silhouette carved from malice. The power surged back, the heater groaning to life. I exhaled, shaky, and checked the security feed again. The figure was gone. My phone buzzed. "Marcus." "All clear, boss. Just checked the perimeter." I didn't believe it. I texted Sarah Nguyen, my mentor at Bridges for Justice, the woman who'd pulled me from obscurity and given me a purpose. "Need to talk. Something's off," she replied instantly. "Come to my place. Now." I grabbed my coat, the defaced photo staring back like a warning, and slipped out the back door, the rain swallowing my footsteps. Sarah's apartment was a cozy loft in the Pearl District, its walls lined with protest posters and books on urban policy. She opened the door, her dark hair in a messy bun, her eyes sharp despite the hour. "You look like hell," she said, handing me a mug of tea. I collapsed onto her couch, the steam warming my hands, and told her everything. The texts, the figure, the vandalism. She listened, her face hardening. "This isn't just Liam's tantrum," she said. "Your family's got the means to bury you, and you're threatening their world." I nodded, the tea bitter on my tongue. Richard's real estate dealings, the ones I'd exposed at 21, were a thread in a larger web. One Olivia's corruption trial was unraveling. "They're scared," Sarah said. "You're not just a senator, you're a witness." I thought of the courtroom, the chaos when Judge Clara Evans recognized me. Olivia's face pale and betrayed, as if I'd stolen her spotlight. Margaret's gasp, her hand clutching her chest. Richard's squint, like he was recalculating a battle plan. I'd gone to witness, not to interfere, but my presence had shifted the game. The media frenzy hadn't stopped. Headlines like "Carter Outcast turned Senator Shocks courtroom" dogged my every step. Worse, the old protest video, the one Liam leaked to ruin me, had resurfaced, now twisted into a smear campaign accusing me of extremist ties. My Senate seat, barely won, was under siege, and I hadn't even been sworn in yet. Sarah leaned forward, her voice low. "You need to hit back, Emily, not with words, but with power. The Truth Shield Act, push it hard, make it untouchable." The act, my brainchild, would criminalize familial blackmail against public figures, a shield for whistleblowers like me. I'd drafted it after the courtroom, after Richard's call accusing me of exploiting the Carter name. "It's risky," I said. "Richard's already got a lobbyist trying to kill it." Sarah's eyes gleamed. "Good, let him try. The louder he fights, the more he exposes himself." I nodded, a spark igniting. She was right. I'd survived worse than threats. I'd survived being erased. The next morning, I stood before a packed town hall in northeast Portland, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. My security team, Marcus and a new hire named Lena, flanked the stage, their eyes scanning the room. The vandalism had made headlines, framing me as a target, but I turned it into fuel. "They want to silence us," I said, my voice carrying over the murmurs. "They want to scare us into submission. But we don't bow to threats, not in Portland, not anywhere." The crowd roared, signs waving. "Read for justice." I announced a new push for the Truth Shield Act, detailing its protections, its defiance of power. "This is for every voice they've tried to crush," I said, my gaze steady, "for every truth they've buried." A man in the back stood, his face obscured by a baseball cap. "What about your family, Senator?" he called, his voice sharp. The room hushed. "You're Carter, right? What's the real story?" My pulse spiked, but I didn't flinch. "My name is Emily Reed," I said, "and my family is every person fighting for what's right." "Next question." The crowd cheered, but the man slipped out, his cap low, leaving a chill in his wake. Marcus caught my eye, nodding toward the exit. They'd check him out. I pushed on, answering questions, shaking hands, but the man's words lingered. He wasn't a random heckler. He was a plant, sent to rattle me. That night, the tabloid hit. Senator Reed's secret past, hacked emails revealed troubled youth. The emails, stolen from my early 20s, painted me as unstable, desperate, a girl begging Liam for forgiveness after our breakup. "I'm sorry, I'll change, just don't leave," one read, my words twisted out of context. The source was anonymous, but Richard's fingerprints were clear. His need to control, to rewrite my story. My staff urged a response, but I refused. "They want me on defense," I said. "I play offense." I scheduled a Senate speech for the next day, doubling down on the Truth Shield Act, knowing it would draw blood. The speech was set for the Oregon State Capitol in Salem, a grand chamber of marble and oak. I stood at the podium, my navy blazer crisp, my hair tucked behind my ears, the defaced photo in my pocket like a talisman. The gallery was packed. Senators, press, activists, and, in the back, a figure I almost missed. Rich. His silver hair caught the light, his posture rigid, his eyes locked on me. My throat tightened, but I began. "Power doesn't always come with a fist," I said, my voice clear. "Sometimes it's a whisper, a threat, a memory used as a weapon. The Truth Shield Act says no more." I detailed the bill, its protections for whistleblowers, its defiance of blackmail. "This is for the silenced," I said, "for those told their truth isn't worth hearing." The chamber erupted, applause drowning out the murmurs. Richard didn't clap. He stood, slipping out his exit a silent challenge. My phone buzzed mid-speech, a text from Liam. "Nice try, Emma. Check X." I ignored it, finishing strong, but dread coiled in my gut. Back in my office, I opened X. A new video, freshly posted, showed me at 21, crying outside a Seattle shelter, my voice breaking. "I have nowhere to go." The caption, Senator Reid's sob story or scam. Comments flooded in, vicious and gleeful. Liam had struck again, his timing surgical. My staff scrambled, but I waved them off. "Let it run," I said, my voice steel. "They're scared. That's why they're hitting this hard." The next blow came at a Senate ethics hearing, called under pressure from a conservative senator tied to Richard's lobbyist. The charge: I'd used Olivia's trial for political gain, violating Senate decorum. The hearing room was a pressure cooker, cameras rolling, my career on the line. The senator, a smug man named Grayson, leaned forward. "Ms. Reid, your family's scandal has conveniently boosted your profile. Care to explain?" I met his gaze. "I don't control my family's actions," I said, "but I control mine. I'm here to serve, not to sensationalize." Grayson pressed, citing the leaked emails, the videos, but I held firm, turning the tables. "This hearing isn't about ethics," I said. "It's about silencing a voice that threatens power." The room buzzed, reporters scribbling. Grayson faltered, adjourning the hearing, but the damage was done. My seat was safe, for now. But the war wasn't over. That night, Liam escalated. A voicemail, his voice smooth and venomous. "Endorse my new AI project, Emily, or I release footage you really don't want out there." The project was a data mining scheme, shady and invasive, dressed up as innovation. I reported him to the FBI, my hands shaking as I sent the evidence. But the threat lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. I drove to Sarah's, needing her clarity. "He's desperate," she said, pouring wine. "You're winning, and he knows it." She paused, her eyes softening. "But you need to decide how far you'll go to bury them." I didn't answer, the defaced photo burning in my pocket. How far? As far as it took. The Carter dinner came a week later, a summons I couldn't ignore. Richard's text was curt. "We need to talk. Friday, 7 p.m. I knew it was a trap, but I went, driven by a need I couldn't name. Not closure, not revenge, but something sharper. The Seattle mansion hadn't changed, its waterfront glow mocking my exile. Margaret opened the door, her face lined, her smile trembling. "Emily," she whispered, reaching for me. I stepped back, my heart a stone. Richard stood in the foyer, his navy blazer pressed, his eyes cold. Olivia sat at the dining table, her hands twisting a napkin, her prosecutor's poise gone. The air was thick with lemon polish and lies. The meal was a farce. Roast lamb, asparagus, wine. No one touched. Margaret tried to fill the silence, her voice brittle. "Remember when you painted the garden shed?" she asked, as if we were a normal family. Richard chimed in. his tone forced. Your campaign's impressive, Emily. Very bold. I watched them, measuring their desperation. Olivia spoke last, her voice a ghost. I messed up, she said, eyes down. I never meant for it to go this far. I waited, fork poised. Then Margaret's hand graced mine, stopping short. We were thinking, she said, maybe you could speak to the prosecutor. Just a word. For Olivia. There it was, the trap laid bare. I set my fork down, the clink a gavel. If I weren't a senator, I asked, my voice level, would you have invited me here? Silence. Richard's jaw tightened. Margaret's eyes welled. Olivia looked away. I stood, my chair scraping the floor. I kept the name Carter, I said. Not for you, but to remind myself who I'd never be. I walked out, Margaret's voice cracking behind me. Emily, please. The door shut, the rain greeting me like an old friend. I didn't look back. The next morning, a whistleblower's email landed in my inbox, anonymous but explosive. Richard wasn't just tied to shady real estate deals. He'd bankrolled Olivia's evidence tampering, funneling money through shell companies. The proof was damning. Bank records, emails, a paper trail leading to the Carter estate. My hands shook as I read, the moral dilemma tearing me apart. Expose him, and I'd destroy Olivia's defense, maybe land them both in prison. Stay silent, and I'd betray every principle I'd fought for. I called Sarah, my voice raw. What do I do? She sighed. You know the answer, Emily. You've always known. I nodded, though she couldn't see. I forwarded the files to the FBI, my heart a furnace of grief and resolve. The fallout was swift. Richard's arrest hit the news like a bomb, his mugshot plastered across every screen. Olivia's trial imploded, her plea deal unraveling. Margaret was hospitalized again, a stroke this time, my cousin texted. I didn't visit. I couldn't. Instead, I poured myself into the Family Accountability Clause, a new policy announced at a national transparency conference in D.C. The room was electric, activists and lawmakers hanging on my words. Silence isn't loyalty, I said, my voice thunder. It's a cage. This clause frees public servants from familial conflicts, from threats dressed as love. I scanned the crowd, spotting Margaret in the front row, frail but present, tears streaming. Richard sat farther back, out on bail, his face unreadable. Olivia wasn't there, her absence a wound I didn't touch. The applause was deafening, a wave of validation. I stepped off the stage, my heart pounding when Margaret approached, her hands trembling. I see you now, she whispered, her voice breaking. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Richard lingered by the exit, his eyes meeting mine. No words, just a nod, heavy with something I couldn't name. Regret, maybe, or surrender. I walked past, the defaced photo still in my pocket, its weight lighter now. Back in Portland, I spoke at a community center, no press, just locals in folding chairs. I wore jeans, a gray cardigan, no title on the screen. People ask how I made it without family, I said, my voice soft but sure. I didn't make it. I just stopped waiting for them. A woman asked, what if they change? I smiled, calm. I'll hear their story. But mine's written, and it's mine. The crowd was quiet, the truth settling like dust. Marcus stood by the door, his eyes proud. Outside, snow fell, soft and fleeting. I stepped into the light, alone but whole, my past a scar I'd learned to wear. I'd been called a failure, a disgrace, a ghost. Now I was Emily Reed, senator, survivor, unbreakable. The world was watching, and I was ready to lead.